Open your cerebral cortex and shift your lobes into upper beta phase, because you are going to have Bitcoin knowledge transmitted directly into your vestibulocochlear. Your host at Bitcoin Knowledge is Trace Mayer, an early Bitcoin advocate since it cost $0.25, but this is not intended to be investment advice. A doctor of jurisprudence, but this is definitely not legal advice. And an investor in core cryptocurrency infrastructure, including Armory, BitPay, Kraken, and Nitagio, but this is not a recommendation of those services. Here, you get fed via direct mind download with pure and free Bitcoin knowledge.
You're enforcing network consensus, and when you're holding your own private keys, and those are your two prongs, that's how you exert your monetary sovereignty. And then it doesn't matter what other people do. They're not in consensus with you. So, like, the issue is, who do you want to be in consensus with? And I mean, how do you redeploy a network that's already out there on the size and scale that Bitcoin is? I mean, they can decide to run different consensus rules, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be in consensus with the vast majority of people using Bitcoin.
PGP said they could, if the hashing power moves over to the Segwit 2x one, the current one may be just not able to, make the difficulty adjustment, and, it'll all slow down and all that kind of shit. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, why would that even be an issue? The whole assumption that the hashing power is going to move over there is based on what economic theory? It's based on a labor theory of value. And like, it's either subjective value theory or it's labor theory of value. And we already know from vast experience, not just in Bitcoin, but just throughout economic history, that the labor theory of value is fallacious. So, like, I don't really understand, like, why anybody would be scared of the hashing power moving over there.
I guess it's the agreement, the New York agreement, and the signers that are on board being a lot of the miners, right? That's the concern, right? In regards to that.
Well, yeah, but why is it a concern? Like, when you look at the 7 network effects that I've outlined with Bitcoin, you have speculation, merchants, consumers, miners, developers, financialization, world settlement, currency. The closer you are to the start of that, the closer you are to speculation, the more interior you are, the more primordial you are in terms of your importance or your rank on the totem pole. Speculators is where it all starts. People who are holding Bitcoin, and they're superior to consumers. How many consumers does it take to move the price up or down compared to a holder? Like, somebody who's holding 5,000 Bitcoin, for example, how many people buying and selling coffee does it take in order to equal the same amount of economic gravity that one holder has? So speculation, the digital gold use case, that's what is really the foundation for a lot of for the price in general. Then we start moving out from that towards consumers. Well, consumers are still a layer more primordial than miners in terms of importance. So miners, like, why are they important? They're important because they add the security. But the only reason they add the security, or in other words, the only reason their work has any value, is because consumers and merchants and holders or speculators value that work. Just because you dig a hole in the middle of North Dakota doesn't mean that hole has any value whatsoever. You have to dig a hole where somebody's, where a consumer or an investor is willing to pay to have that hole dug. Otherwise, you're just misallocating capital and you're destroying wealth.
Right. And so you're going by the theory that the users at the end of the day is what matters. Is that correct?
I mean, I agree with you, Trace. I mean, who gives a fuck if you mine the shit out of some coin and nobody's using it?
Well, that's what I'm saying is, like, you're just misallocating capital if you're mining something unless people are willing to pay for it. So when we're talking about users, it's important to distinguish the two different classes. There's speculators, which are holding Bitcoin, and that's speculative demand. And then there's transactional demand, and that's people who are using Bitcoin solely to transfer value over the communications channel. Now, the price elasticity of demand for the transactional demand component of Bitcoin is pretty much irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether Bitcoin's 5 cents or $500 or $50,000. You can perform that transfer value equally well. But we've got transaction fees. But now with like Lightning Network and Segwit being activated, we'll be able to bring down some of those prices. But why the consumers or the merchants are superior to the miners in regards to that is that they have substitute goods that they can use instead of Bitcoin if the miners are charging too much for that block space for their particular use case. But when we're talking about transactional demand, that's where now someone's
calling him.
Yeah, sorry about that. Someone's calling and then it was ringing on my computer.
Go ahead and answer the phone.
I'm not going to answer it, of course. But yeah, so
if it's ringing on your computer, you can push the power button on your Apple iPhone and it'll stop ringing on the computer.
Yeah, the iPhone squashed the room because I don't even like to talk on the phone. But anyways, so we just talked about transactional demand. Now supply is fixed and known in advance. So really the only other part of the equation that changes is the speculative demand, which is like a dog on LSD. It just runs up and down like all over the place based on human emotions. But so like this idea that we're going to have institutions or businesses that have allocated millions, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to customized hardware, that they're going to go like dig holes in the middle of North Dakota that nobody's willing to pay them to do, with an instant opportunity cost that's easily switchable back to the main Bitcoin blockchain. I don't really see that happening, or if it does happen, I don't know that it's going to last very long because that's a huge opportunity cost.
Why are people mining BCH out of curiosity?
Well, that BCH is a.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry. Difficulty adjustment.
Yeah, I mean,
but it's still often less profitable to mine BCH than it is BTC, and yet it retains hash value or hash power.
No, it does not. Look at the hash power.
Then right now there is hash power on the BCH chain, even though it is more
there's
profitable
hash
to mine
power.
BTC.
There's hash power, but there's not a lot. And when that thing does a backward difficulty adjustment, that hash power goes away for the most part.
Even when it has a difficulty adjustment, which makes BTC more profitable to mine, it still retains some level of hash power, even quite a bit, like in the petahashes.
It loses a lot, if not most. So
it loses like 90% of the hash power, and then it comes back when it becomes more profitable to mine after the stupid backward difficulty adjustment. I mean,
Yeah, so let me address that. So what happens with BCH is you got the emergency difficulty adjustment, which decreases the hash power that's required in order to create a block. Now, what's interesting about the effects of this is that it incentivizes the miners to move from the main Bitcoin chain over to the BCH chain. Okay. Now, why? And somehow people think that this hurts like the Bitcoin chain. Actually, if you think about it, what it does is it slows down the inflation rate of the Bitcoin chain, right? Because block rewards now happen in a longer period. And it also increases the transaction fees, which is also good for holders of Bitcoin, for speculators, because what that does is it effectively destroys UTXOs that are no longer worth what it costs to send them. On the other side, when you move all that hash power over to BCH with the way that the EDA works, what it does is it pulls production of Bitcoin from the future into the present. And from what at least last time I was looking at the numbers, if I crunched them correctly, what happens is you have you're supposed to produce 18,000 Bitcoins, and in reality, it produced something like 25,000 Bitcoins. And so that additional work, hold on, I think somebody's downstairs. I gotta go check that real quick.
I'm enjoying this fresh perspective.
I'm interested when he comes back to hear why he puts merchants at such a high level, because the conversation we were having earlier put merchant adoption as useless and meaningless. So I'd be interested to hear why merchant adoption to him is such an important aspect.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm back. Someone was at the door. So what it does, you have this 25,000 BCH that's produced when really only 18,000 is supposed to be produced. So that's increased the money supply, right? That's a form of inflation. And effectively, who's that paid for by? It's paid for by everybody who's holding BCH tokens. Now, the reason you would want to increase the rate of speed at which the tokens are emitted is if there's increased usage of Bitcoin and people are willing to pay more. Well, in BCH's case, that's actually not the case. Why? Because look at how many transactions are actually done on the network. The blocks are nowhere close to full. And what would happen is, like with Bitcoin, you see the transaction fees per block actually increase, and that incentivizes more mining power to come online, which causes that time between blocks to be decreased, which increases the inflation rate. But is it really a cost that both speculators and the users are willing to pay? If it's not, then effectively what it is it's a wealth transfer from the holders to the miners. And so in BCH's case, because the blocks aren't full and there's not really any bid happening for the block space, what's happening is they're effectively inflating 7,000 Bitcoins BCH's worth of value during each of these adjustment periods for their benefit, to the detriment of all the holders of BCH. And what's also kind of ironic about this, it's mainly coming from people who have their BCHs locked up on something like Coinbase, where they're not even able to trade even if they wanted to.
Hey Trace, this is Phil Potter. How you doing?
Hey Phil, pretty good. How you doing?
Good. I think that's a very astute point. The problem here is that there's so many people that are long BCH and can't sell even if they wanted to. Whether you're on Bitstamp or Coinbase or Zappo or wherever, and that's definitely a problem, which is kind of artificially making the supply artificially low of BCH right now. And you're exactly right. The EDA creates a situation where the oscillations over time are just going to bring forward the inflation, and which is really effectively a tax on the hodlers. And in this case, we have a lot of hodlers who perhaps don't want to be hodlers.
Well, we do have a lot of hodlers that don't want to be hodlers. But what I think people really should do is they should get a class action attorney, and they should start suing all of these companies that are being unjustly enriched by having access to the BCHs that they're custodians of, but haven't actually given to the customers, to the people that they're holding.
I would say in theory that sounds right. I mean, in the case of Coinbase, they said, look, we're going to give it to you. We just have to wait till January, because in their case, it's a very big operational headache. And I know it's the same thing with Zappo, because they have all these very complex security mechanisms surrounding all the keychains and this, that, and the other to actually release or emit the BCH to their customers is a big operational nightmare.
Well, that is the moral hazard that the miners who've engaged in this fork have shifted onto the exchanges, but it's also the business that the exchanges are in. And did it at Kraken. Didn't have any problem getting it.
Well, that's true, but I mean, Kraken took a very big risk doing it the way they did, especially having people who are margin long and margin shorts. It could have been pretty ugly.
Well, I mean, but we still held all the keys at Kraken, right? So, but at the end of the day, what we're talking about is, something that multiple companies, like whether it's Kraken or Bitfinex supported BCH from what I understand.
Yep.
Multiple companies in the industry have been able to implement and apply this without losses very quickly in a matter of a few days or even a week or whatever. And yet big holders, other companies are not able to get this done in like 3 months. What the damages are that you have this missed opportunity cost. And so wanted to sell at $600, and let's say that the price is $200 in January, and you're now able to sell, but for Coinbase not, rolling out the service to do it, you have $400 of damages.
I agree. Look, people are going, but the point is that these services are going to admit the BCH before any suit could ever be pulled together, or any enterprising a class action attorney can gather a reasonable class. So it's whereas I agree with you conceptually and in theory. I think in practice it's just people are going to get it. It's just delayed, and various companies can hide behind operational concerns that created the delays. I mean, this was foisted upon on exchanges. I mean, we had basically a week to prepare. I mean, yes, I guess we kind of heard about it, but nobody really took it seriously. And then, it became kind of a serious thing, and it was going to happen. And customers were pinging us saying, "I want my BCH," and we're like, well, fuck, I guess we got to do something about it. That was us, and that was basically every other exchange. And
yeah, but it also highlights who's got their technical competence together and who doesn't. I mean, look at like Bittrex. Bittrex did a great job with it too. In my opinion,
they don't have margin on that. So
well, I mean,
margin makes it very complicated. I mean, it really does, Trace. I mean, I don't want to get into it now, but that. The peer-to-peer margin lending markets made it complicated for Poloniex, made it complicated for us. Kraken doesn't have a peer-to-peer market; it's just Kraken lending. So there's a lot of considerations. It was complicated. We tried a novel approach to try to make sure that we addressed the concerns as best we could, given basically 7 days to kind of craft a solution. It's not as straightforward. It wasn't as straightforward as it seems.
Yeah, well, and I agree with that, but it's not the type of thing that should be taking like 3 or 4 months. And if it does take that long, then people have missed out or potentially missed out on being able to, significant profits. And, that's missed opportunity cost, and that's a form of damages, which when you're dealing with 750,000 BCHs, all of a sudden that can become, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damages.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm just not sure how successful anybody's going to be on pulling together a class action suit, unless, of course, BCH basically goes to zero before January. Like people in Coinbase could complain, but I think it would be hard to assess specific damages. But nonetheless, I wanted to back up to another really interesting point I think you made, Trace, was that the point about high fees make certain parts of the UTXO set unspendable, and that is kind of effectively decreasing the overall supply. And I thought that was a very interesting point. I hadn't really thought about that before. Is there any analysis about that out there that you know?
Oh yeah,
about?
I mean, I've seen quite a bit of analysis. Anybody can look at the UTXO set, and basically what you do is you look at the UTXO set and you'd figure out how many bits it would take in terms of transaction size, and then you'd look at the current cost of the fees in order to get that transaction done. And from that you can actually see, like, based on where fees are at, how much of the UTXO set is basically worthless or worth less than zero, meaning that you can't move it for less than what the transaction fee cost would be.
Right.
And so, I mean, I totally understand like why people would be upset about transaction fees going up, because it destroys part of the money supply, and it's part of their money supply, right?
Yeah, at the same time, there's that balancing act between higher fees definitely impedes usability of Bitcoin for a certain class of applications. But counteracting that, and I had never really thought about it, counteracting that is that the monetary supply is shrinking because the various certain amounts of dust, whatever, or your definition of dust is constantly changing based upon what the effective fees on the network are. I just have never seen any graphs or any analysis on this that kind of like shows, well, based upon these types of fees and this average transaction size, here's a graph of the total supply, based upon this fee assumption, that fee assumption, X, Y, and Z. I think that would be interesting to see. I've never seen it.
Yeah, well, and we should also find that who does it harm and who does it benefit? Well, it harms the people who are using it much more for the transactional demand cases, the merchants and the consumers, but it actually accrues to the benefit of the hodlers. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's another example of where the closer you are, in terms of these 7 network effects, the closer you are to the very center of that first network effect, the more benefit you get overall from the Bitcoin system.
Trace, I want to go back because you say, they should launch a class action lawsuit, and I completely disagree with you. I think it would be completely worthless because at the end of the day, if you talk about an exchange like Coinbase, they listed Bitcoin and they have Bitcoin, and it's not up to them to go about supporting every single fork. I mean, what if Dash does a fork and there's Dash Classic? I mean, is somebody going to take a class action lawsuit against Finex? I mean, when does it end? And on top of this, they did say, look, we're not offering it. If you want it, withdraw. So it's not like users didn't have a choice either.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, I totally agree. It's a difficult philosophical and moral issue because effectively the miners are able to engage in activity that has moral hazard and shifts the costs onto the exchanges. So, I mean,
I think I thought it was fucking bullshit that this was being pushed on us, and that we had very little time to prepare. And meanwhile, we're busy trying to roll out other things to increase the reliability of the exchange and the throughput, and try to support our existing customers for our existing business. And here this fork was being foisted upon us now, and because BCH is at least pretty successful by most any standard at this point. I mean, everybody's happy with the free money they've got. It's going to just engender further forks. I mean, and the reality is that it's actually a great way to distribute a coin. Like Omi's Go, for example, is doing an airdrop for anybody that had Ethereum as of June 26th or whatever it was. And that's wonderful. Great way to market your token, but it's a huge pain in the ass for exchanges to have to implement and do the math and and credit and
if you're gonna do it responsibly, kind of like Byteball has done, in my opinion. They've done and Stellar also did kind of an airdrop, and you've got Bitcore, BTX. But I mean, I think 2018 is going to be the year of the fork because basically you can have a bunch of cheap Chinese knockoffs where the people who do the knocking off are able to shift onto other parties basically all the costs of doing that, right? Like they can make Bitfinex pay to support the coin.
Exactly. It's free. It's free to them.
So it's a form of moral hazard.
And all they have to do is spend some money on marketing to get some buzz going, which gets the customers emailing the exchanges, and basically forces this kind of all the administration and the distribution headaches to the exchanges to have to deal with. So I agree with you. I'm worried, frankly, that we're just going to see a whole bunch of these, and we're going to have a situation where people. If an exchange chooses not to support some kind of fork, all of a sudden they're going to everybody's going to want to withdraw their Bitcoin and take it somewhere where they can, because everybody's trying to follow this kind of pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and there's going to be a myriad of rainbows out there.
Right, but that actually might be a benefit and not a bug. Right, because what this does is, I actually think the exchanges, perhaps even change the user agreements or the terms of service so that it specifically is agreed to that the fork benefits go to the exchange, perhaps as like some type of a storage fee or custodianship fee or something. But what that would do is, okay, so yeah, we have a lot of people withdrawing coins now, but that's great because I think having lots of bank runs on a regular basis is a good thing because it keeps everybody honest because everybody should be holding the coins that they say they have.
It does, except when you're dealing with exchanges that are like ourselves that deal in margin and people are short, long, people are borrowing the asset. And so all of a sudden you could have people who are short BTC USD, and all of a sudden everybody's long BTC USD, they're pulling all their coins off the exchange because we're not going to support the BCH split. So everybody wants their coins. So all of a sudden the people that are short are going to find this out. They have no borrow, and they're going to be bought back in. There's going to be a big short squeeze as a result of that. So I agree for a place like Bitstamp that doesn't do leverage. It's a no-brainer. You choose to support it or don't support it. You're basically bank. It's 100% reserve. It doesn't matter to you as an exchange or your users whether or not your Bitcoin reserves whether or not your customer Bitcoin balances go to zero or stay at 100,000. But when you're running an exchange that's got margin trading and allows people to short, it's a much more complicated issue to try to maintain a balance such that you don't completely fuck your users.
Well, that's, it's anytime we start getting into any type of fractional reserve or even margin for that sense, it's
There's
kind of going against.
Wait. There's no fractional reserve going on here. People are short. They need to borrow Bitcoins in order to be short. And on our platform, the term limit, the longest term you can have on a loan is 30 days, but a lot of people are borrowing it 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. And when it expires, it automatically goes in and borrows again, whatever the rate is. But the issue here is that what happens if there's just no one that's willing to lend because no one's willing to keep coins on the exchange because because that exchange is not supporting the split or the fork. And that's a problem because then you forcibly have to buy in all of your shorts because we are not operating a fractional reserve system. You cannot be short unless you have a borrow. And if no one's willing to lend because all those people are long and are pulling their Bitcoins off because we're not supporting the fork, well, that's a problem. That is a needle that exchanges like us have to thread very carefully. And and Kraken too, and it's a potential problem and a potential powder keg.
But also it's a potential for entrepreneurs because those who calculate correctly, they profit, and those who calculate incorrectly, they have losses. And when we have a lot of forks like this going on, or airdrops or whatever, where you need to hold the private keys, and if exchanges decide that they're not going to be supporting the forks, or in other words, that they get to the benefit of the forks to accrue to them instead of the people that they're custodying assets for, then what that'll do is it'll change the economic calculation that people have in terms of holding Bitcoin themselves, the private keys, versus holding on exchanges. And all of this helps go into how we actually price the Bitcoins, right? And it kind of makes it more complicated, and all of that adds entrepreneurial opportunity, which further incentivizes even more of these network effects to grow with the Bitcoin network.
I agree, and that's why I feel like, but yeah, you're totally right about that. But when you're running an exchange that deals with margin, there are a myriad of nuances associated with handling these types of forks. And at the end of the day, I feel like we probably should and have to support all of these things as they come down the pipeline. I think that's how we're going to do it. And we're going to develop a procedure and process to do that that's going to be more elegant than what we had to deal with last time when we had 7 days notice. But, it still kind of sucks that, anybody running a project that invests some money in marketing dollars can get their coin distributed and put in the hands of all these people, and basically pushing that custodian cost off to, or rather the operational cost off to exchanges. And any exchange that chooses to tax it, more than any other exchange does, well, they'll all of a sudden see a huge outflow of Bitcoins, which, again, if you're not running a margin-based exchange, is totally fine. But when you are running a margin-based exchange, it's problematic for a lot of reasons. And it's, that part of it just sucks. That's all.
Well, I don't disagree with you. Did we have any questions from the room? I think I saw some of those in there.
Wow.
Well, I just want to say, I agree with PGP because, when we saw the BCH thing coming about, coins were withdrawn and the rates went through the roof. And that's just going to lead to massive short squeezes because when those contracts come up for renewal, they're then at rates they can't afford. And but
I've still got some of my Bitcoins lent out at 0.71% a day on Bitfinex because of that now. And let's not forget that, like PGP said, it's a 30-day maximum term loan, and BCH was thrust upon the exchanges with only 7 days, with about a week's notice. So guys who had their coins loaned out for 30 days, like a day before the BCH announcement, this whole thing causes so many issues, and especially to the peer-to-peer lending market. It's a mess. It's very complicated. It's not the same as any other exchange.
Trace, what do you think about the whole idea of free money? Because this annoyed me. Like when BCH just kind of existed and it just existed at this price, it just like this market cap just kind of fabricated out of thin air. It's like we haven't had all these new dollars come on the exchange. Where's this, this suddenly all this, unfucking claimed wealth come from?
Well, that's a far more interesting question, like theoretically, because how I kind of look at it is, we have eBay, and then eBay spun off PayPal, and we had both eBay and PayPal, and shortly thereafter, the market cap of both were higher than eBay was before. And so in this case, I think what we're seeing is you have this spin-off of BCH, or the fork, and since everybody's kind of got some of it, it's got immediate network effects because it's got a bunch of holders, and then some services started using it, and then you had a bunch of confusingly similar terminology, like calling it Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin. It's like they're so weak in their own assessment of their ability to run their fork that they need to like leech off of a different project's name or whatever, but that confusingly similarness to it, all of these things that which might have been a form of brand damage, but then afterwards we see both Bitcoin and Bcash higher than they were before, and sitting around a combined market cap currently of close to $5,000. So I think what we're seeing is there was a lot of uncertainty in the market about how forks would be treated and like problems that they could cause and like all types of things like this. But we just went through one, and the world didn't end for Bitcoin. And so maybe that resolved some of the investor uncertainty. Plus, Segwit got activated and all this stuff. So more capital comes in. So we don't know how all the capital is flowing around. I kind of look at it. It's a dividend that was paid for with brand damage to Bitcoin, but even then, that's only in the short term. In the medium to long term, I think it further cements the Bitcoin brand as being what it is.
Yeah, I agree. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
I mean, it didn't kill Bitcoin because they had very strong two-way replay protection built in. I think that that's what made this kind of fork. It's kind of an airdrop spinoff, whatever you want to call it. Ultimately manageable for exchanges. It was, but the reality is that with the upcoming sort of Segwit 2x situation, where there may, it remains to be seen, but there may not be significant support on both sides of that, and there's no replay protection planned for that. So that's going to be a complete clusterfuck. What do you think about that?
Yeah, the not having the replay protection is going to be, it's like I don't think that's very nice to new users. But really, what it does is it just further incentivizes people to have a much more security conscious approach to Bitcoin and how they treat their Bitcoin. You got to treat your Bitcoin with respect, or you're going to lose them, or they're going to disappear. And the other thing is, like all these people running on SPV wallets, and maybe they'll be getting off on the wrong chain or whatever. It's a very sophisticated attack, but guess what? If you're a holder, if you're hodling, and you're at the center of that network effect, I mean, you can sit there and you actually don't mind if a lot of the hashing power isn't hashing, because then the rate of inflation decreases. So
and
I mean,
you have both.
you
And
can
you have both coins. You know?
yeah, and you have both coins. So like hodlers are just fine. And because I mean, this idea that we got hash rate jumping over to BCH, it's like you realize what's happening, right? Like they're inflating BCH at a faster rate to the detriment of BCH hodlers and to the benefit of the BTC hodlers.
Yeah, exactly.
Trace Migas put a question in the chat. He said, "I'd like to know what you think about this attack vector. A country party could push a fork, sustain an artificial price, and push miners to the hard fork chain because more profitable, and bring the legacy chain to a halt. Wouldn't be a good way to kill the legacy."
Yeah, I mean that would be an incredibly expensive attack to run. I think that just to keep the Bitcoin price stable where it's at is something like $78.5 million a day of capital that needs to flow in, and even on BCH, I think it's something like $16.5 million a day. So I mean, these are not insubstantial.
How are you getting that number?
6 million per Bitcoin.
Just like 1,800 Bitcoins are mined a day.
Oh, maybe it was in a difficulty period. I'd have to go back and like rerun the exact numbers on it. Let's see.
I think it's more like $8 million a day for BTC.
Yep, it is.
Yeah, so 1440 times 12.5 times 4,400. That's $80 million.
What for a day?
8 million.
8.
No. 1440.
40. Okay, the current price of Bitcoin 43.70 times 1,800 is what's supposed to be mined every day.
Yep. Your math is correct, PGP.
I got 8 million.
It's very little.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. It's not, not
It's
words. It's a lot of money still.
Yeah, but it's not $80 million.
It's not an order of magnitude higher.
Yeah, right. I think I had it. I think I had it based on 1440 and not 144. Yeah, Douglas got it. So, but I mean, so we're looking at BCH. They're actually they've increased the rate of their block emissions, right? And so, like it's at we could go and calculate like how much new capital has to flow into BCH just to keep the price stable. And if it's a state-sponsored attack, it's like, well, how much is a state gonna really like pump into something like this? I mean, they could do it with hundreds of millions of dollars, right?
BCH also slows down at points too. At the beginning of mining mini blocks.
Yeah.
Well, it's made for more than made up for it. I mean, they're way ahead of Bitcoin now in terms of block height.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like this non-symmetrical EDA is definitely a bit of a clusterfuck.
It's wild. Yeah, it's a total mess. But they got a hard fork to fix that.
Yeah, I mean, they're at like 120 difficulty. They've had 1,616 more blocks than core. Like if you're
1,600 more blocks.
Yeah, 1,616 because their block height's at 484,017 and the others at 482,401. Yeah, so I mean they're like that's expensive, that like why are their hodlers paying that much extra in block reward subsidy? Just like
especially since there's a lot of willing hodlers who got their BCH still tied up.
Right, unwilling hodlers. Yeah, because I mean, you look at the fees. The fees are the difference is like 1,724x, like between the fees per kilobyte with Bcash and with Core. So, like obviously, the people who are using Bcash for transactions, they aren't willing to pay, and so the hodlers are having to pay, and like prioritizing prioritizing people sending transactions over hodlers. Well, I just like you're getting your network effects out of order.
Yeah, and I don't believe that amount of money is flowing into BCH every day. I just can't believe it myself. I mean, the way I think about it is that most of their value for like all these coins comes from Bitcoin. They buy it with Bitcoin, they sell it with Bitcoin. I mean, I don't know what the volume's like on the two, but I always think its value really comes from the value of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, you look at I was looking at one of the miner addresses on BCH, and they're holding something like 10,000 BCHs in this mining address, and they just keep accumulating more in there. So, and they haven't been moving them. So, and there's some other addresses like that. So I think some of these miners are not only are people buying BCHs, but the miners are also holding the BCHs that they otherwise probably should be selling to meet their fixed expenses. So they're also exactly kind of speculating on BCHs going up.
Those miners are retarded.
Well, I mean, the issue is like how long, like how much value does the BCH chain actually add? Right. And that's one of the reasons I really like transaction fees and as a metric to determine like fundamental value, because what other metric do we have to measure the value that a blockchain adds? We don't have any other metric where people are actually paying hard costs to use the blockchain. That's what we get with transaction fees. Even with the block rewards, it's a form of inflation, and so like that's a little bit more fuzzy. But with transaction fees, I mean, we see what people are actually willing to pay to use it, and how many transactions do hodlers actually have to engage in?
Yeah,
right. Like they don't have to engage in transactions very often.
But there's a problem with that theory, isn't there? A problem with that in that the miners can manipulate the fee market, which they're probably currently doing now.
Well, sure, to a certain extent they can, but you still have a price elasticity of demand for the transactional fees, and you have substitute goods. If Bitcoin's too expensive, go use Bcash, go use PivX, go use Dash, go use Litecoin. I mean, we got plenty of other options. So there are plenty of substitute goods that people can use for transactional demand. So I mean, okay, miners, I guess, can like try to squeeze out a little bit more in terms of fees, but I don't. But eventually, there's a limit that people are willing to pay, and that's a limit that each person is choosing individually, and then it gets reflected into the transactional fees.
Nobody wants to eat at a restaurant where it's easy to get a reservation.
Well, maybe if they run a Bitcoin exchange and make a ton of money, they can be like that, right?
But in some senses, like the reality is the fact that there's so much competition for block space and people are willing to pay as much as they're willing to pay. I think is bullish, not bearish, for the value proposition in Bitcoin. I think that's kind of an a priori assumption surrounds that kind of viewpoint, but that's the one I subscribe to for sure.
Well, you're correct, Phil, because everybody, like, you can always pay less to use Bitcoin, right? Like just because fees are high now doesn't mean that they'll be high tomorrow, or they'll be high a week from now or a year from now. If people are unwilling to pay those fees, then the fees will come down and it'll naturally adjust.
It just gets in the way of using Bitcoin as a transactional currency for relatively small everyday type purchases. I've always felt that is like that use case is really, that use case is a red herring, but today at least. But it does get in the way of that use case. All others, for hodlers, for large cross-border transactions, payments, things like that. The fee inflation here that we're having, I don't think is a problem at all.
Phil, do you mean that the merchant payments, you think Bitcoin for merchant payments just isn't a good solution?
Zane, I don't think that there's that much Bitcoin being used as a kind of retail payment solution for shit on the web. It's just for small stuff. It's just not happening.
Yeah, we can
the whole merchant adoption thing. It's always been a red herring in my mind.
Well, we can look at the numbers.
I find it somewhat odd that it's a red herring, but it's a feature that's been added into Bitfinex.
What feature is that?
Auto sell feature. I mean, the original name for it was merchant tools.
Yeah, but we don't promote that. It's just never really. It's not something we hear about from people, and I don't know. I mean, BitPay.
Well,
I don't know how much money BitPay is really making. How many people are actually using Bitcoin to go buy $10 items that, I mean, sure, if you're going to buy stuff from Newegg or Dell and you're spending a couple $1,000 to buy a new computer or buy some mining equipment or what have you, and you're paying hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, you don't care about a $5 transaction fee.
Phil, I mean, I remember the discussion where we talked with Raphael about implementing and turning live the merchant adoption feature, the merchant tools feature, and it wasn't because we just thought it'd be for shits and giggles. It was because we were getting requests for it. So I mean, there was attention paid to it, which is why it went live.
We're not getting requests for it.
And then furthermore, beyond that, I, along with many of my friends and many other people, use Bitcoin every single day for those payments. And it was a lot nicer when we were paying 50 cents versus $7 for a transaction.
I don't disagree. I just don't think that the sort of like consumer to merchant transfers of Bitcoin is a big part of the picture. I agree it's part of the picture. I just don't think it's a big part of it right now. It just isn't. We're still in that speculative phase, and Bitcoin certainly has utility for transferring large amounts of money cross-border between people, what have you. But the fact that people are willing to pay $5 for a transaction right now could be an indicator that Bitcoin doesn't give a fuck about merchant adoption right now, or for small size merchant adoption, for small ticket shit. Bitcoin doesn't care about that.
Can I rewind for 1 second? I just wanted to touch on Trace's theory that transaction fees may be a good metric to find the correct price of Bitcoin. I don't know, because if you look at any type of efficiency upgrades on Bitcoin, like Segwit or Lightning, things like that, those things drive down the fee market, so that would be bearish for Bitcoin.
But
well, I mean, it wouldn't be bearish, because you'd get increased usage in terms of those merchant use cases. So you're going to be increasing the network effects. But I'm just like, what metric out there, like blockchains, they don't have EBITDA, right? Like, I mean, how do we value these things? Is kind of the question I'm asking. And so that's why, well, one metric I like is being able to value them based on how much people are willing to pay in terms of transaction fees. But with things like Segwit and Lightning Network, these are going to increase. It's going to be like compression. So more people are going to be able to use these. We're going to have additional layers. So more people overall are going to be able to use Bitcoin as a result of those things, which means that they're going to have to be coming in and out. They're going to have to be open, closing Lightning channels. I mean, imagine if instead of having a single transaction where somebody's buying like a $500,000 gold bar, and so they're willing to pay $7 for transaction fee, instead you're opening and closing a Lightning Network channel where you've had $50 million worth of transactions go over it. And so now it's people who are operating lots of Lightning Network channels that are completing for the block space instead of just one single economic transaction.
Yeah. Flipper, you wanted to touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, because, I mean, Dash, just the other day, maybe yesterday, I think it hit 0.98. The people are valuing that at almost 10% of the value of Bitcoin. And yet the blocks are empty.
Per dash. It's not 10% of the total value of Bitcoin.
But the blocks are empty. And it's the same like NEM,
Nobody uses these things. They're scams.
Yeah, it's like nobody's using these. And like so many of the top coins on the market, it's like Ethereum Classic, You look on this coin market cap at these coins, and you go and look at the block explorers. They're empty. They're dead. This is vapor.
They're just speculative vehicles. That's all.
Well, I mean, we had Webvan and Pets.com and like all this stuff, and a lot of capital got misallocated, and then the crash came and the tide went out, and we found out who was swimming naked and who wasn't. Like we have a lot of speculative money in the Bitcoin and blockchain space, and I mean, who knows when we might have a sector-wide change again, where we have a bear market and where we get to shake out a whole bunch of these players.
That's well said, Trace. I agree. I mean, we're in that speculative fervor moment. It's like the dot-com bubble, and it could go up 10x from here. All this shit before we have that sort of reckoning. That's
yeah. I mean, 10x. Yeah, I mean, we had $0.3 trillion in the tech bubble height. We were only at like 115 billion or 150 billion or whatever it is right now with the whole entire crypto industry market cap. So, I mean, we could see a 20x increase in market cap across the board on all these coins. And then maybe we would start be getting frothy and everything. Plus, we're in a totally different environment now with quantitative easing and negative interest rate policy, zero interest rate policy, all the misallocations of capital, the implosion of the current system, just the financial innovation and wealth creation that is happening. Like we do have fundamental wealth creation happening in all of what we're doing here. So, some of this is speculative fervor, but some of it is genuine wealth creation. And another big part of it's wealth transfer. So, we're in the right industry at the right time, and you want to be long more than you want to be short, in my opinion.
Amen.
Speaking of which, is that the dip? Are we done? Are we going back up?
Hey, Trace, would you mind kind of giving us a rundown on what you think about top, say, 5 or 10 cryptos out there?
Yeah.
Oh man, my top 5 or 10 cryptos.
I mean, just pull up CoinMarketCap. I mean, obviously we know how you feel about Bitcoin, but
yeah,
what do you think about the others?
I like Bitcoin. So Ether's got a lot of corporate support, obviously. What I'm worried about is the rate at which their blockchain is growing, and also the cavalier attitude that Vitalik has towards security. He said, he just tweeted out recently, like, the entire industry is paying too much for security, and it's like, man, person to say that the market is totally wrong and what's for security. I mean, it's a market, so obviously, like, we're valuing security as a whole for a reason. But look at the problems that we've had over there at Ether. I mean, they like roll in a big, massive request into the Parity wallet that sits there for 6 months, and then people get hacked and lose $30 million. Who's to say that dev didn't put that in the wallet on purpose in order to steal everybody's money? Gavin Wood, that he didn't just steal everybody's money that way. And so, like, this cavalier attitude that is out there towards security, and it shows up right there in like in the whole Ethereum project, which has a $32 billion market cap. I mean, maybe people just have to lose a lot of money before it focuses their mind to take security seriously. And that's, and that's really Bitcoin's selling point, right? Is security, is digital gold. And so then we keep going down.
Go ahead, Bill. Rock solid reference client.
Yeah, rock solid reference client. I mean, like, it's all
Ethereum
about security.
Ethereum doesn't have. They're all about the protocol, no reference client. It's just define the, go ahead.
Yeah, so Ethereum, we've got issues with the size of the blockchain. I mean, like 30% of their nodes aren't operating anymore. I mean, it's like their blockchain is huge. It's absolutely huge, and it's growing at a very fast rate, especially compared to Bitcoin. And then look at how much CPU processing power it requires even to run a full node. I mean, that in and of itself like tells the entire story of Ethereum. So, between like the lack of decentralization, the lack of scalability, the lack of security, I kind of look at Ethereum and it's like, well, I mean, it's a fun speculative project and you move fast and break things, but I just don't know that I would want to leave any serious amount of value there for a year or two. Then, we go down to the next one, we get Bitcoin Cash. Like, we already discussed like the EDA, the how the miners are fleecing the hodlers through performing a whole bunch of work that really shouldn't be valued because the blocks aren't even full anyways. Then we get to Ripple. Ripple, I mean, I don't even know what to make of Ripple. I mean, I went and met with Chris Larson, like 3 or 4 years ago in San Francisco. So I've been following the Ripple project for a while, but they're doing a lot of stuff, I guess, kind of behind the closed doors. And so I just haven't really been able to follow what they're doing. And I don't really even know why or understand why their market cap is so high, other than they have a ton of locked up tokens. That's another thing about Bitcoin that I really like, is that nobody's locked up. This stuff's all trading. Like, it's a very free market. I mean, people can cast aspersions on exchanges or tethers or like whatever it is, but at the end of the day, like, those Bitcoins, they go into a transaction that goes into the blockchain, and so you have to deliver 100% quantity and quality of like whatever it is, or it didn't happen. And so Ripple, I don't even know how to properly value that thing, or whether any actual fundamental stuff's getting done, or whether they're just trying to get a whole bunch of big hodlers to buy and then lock them up for long periods of time. Litecoin, I mean, activated Segwit, it's always kind of been there in reserve, for Bitcoin, copycat. So, I mean, like, why is it at $3 billion market cap? I don't really know. Maybe people use it a lot for mixing, which is going to take off, with cross blockchain atomic swaps with the Segwit enables. Then we've got Dash. Dash is, so I've actually really been interested in Dash and like watched it. I interviewed Evan Duffield on my podcast when it was $3, and now it hit $400 this week. I think Dash has actually made a fundamental innovation in how they use these master nodes to pay out on different projects that people want. And so, like Bitcoin, if you're going to evangelize Bitcoin, you kind of have to do it out of the goodness of your heart. But with Dash, you can like submit a proposal and get paid directly from the blockchain. So I think that's actually kind of fundamental innovation. So there we go. There's the top 6. We got any more we want to talk about?
Do you think it's worth $400?
No, I don't. If I had any Dash, I definitely would have sold it at $400. But then again, I probably would have sold it at $80 or $120. I'm kind of bad at taking profits. So, but nobody ever went broke taking profits either, right?
Right. No, that's true. I just want to back up to one thing. I thought I heard you very briefly cast aspersions upon Tether. I'm a principal in Tether. I just want to know what your issues with that product are.
Well, first, I haven't done enough research on it. I read that article that I'm sure that you read, that like 100 million of them got created or whatever.
It's all FUD.
And I just haven't, I don't have any tethers. And so like, I don't have a monkey, like it's not my monkey, not my circus type of thing. But the point I'm making is that if people do have tethers and they buy Bitcoins, and then like the Bitcoins have to show up in the blockchain. Right. So like we've got a free market. So regardless of because you're able to settle into this immutable blockchain. So, right. Regardless of any of the other issues that are swirling around out there, like whether it's US dollars or whether it's the bank or like whatever it is, like, or tethers or Dash or whatever it is, you can settle into the blockchain and you can know that you've got Bitcoins, and you can run your full node and do your own network consensus and hold your own private keys. And so that's really changed our risk-free rate and kind of changed our numeraire in terms of like, what is it that is actually a risk-free asset out here? I mean, is Ethereum a risk-free asset? No. Look at all the issues that it's had. And I think it's got huge scalability issues going down the road. And so, when we're looking at this, that's kind of the point I was making, not to like attack Tether specifically, but to make the point that we're settling onto the Bitcoin blockchain, and you can't game that, like you
right.
can game a whole lot of other stuff out there with lines of credit or margin or like whatever it is, or lending, or like all of the repos. Like, I mean, our current financial system is great at like 3-card money, right? But like Bitcoin, they're either in the address in the blockchain or they're not. And that, I think, provides a fundamental level of transparency that people are then able to trust. And that's really the big value proposition that Bitcoin gives us. And I think a lot of people playing around in cryptocurrency land, they don't fully appreciate what that means, being able to trust like something. I mean, it's going to be great when some of these big whales that are holding BCHs they've now like shot of their BCHs, and they're incentivized to do 10, 20, 50 block reorgs on the BCH blockchain. That's going to get real fun.
Trace, I agree with you on Ethereum. I think it has massive scalabilities going forward. I mean, just one big ICO will just crash Ethereum for a whole day. And it's like, and there's that other site like Ethereum or whatever it's called, or Augur or anything. You try to use any of these smart contracts, they're so slow. They're always changing the gas limit. So contracts were before didn't, now, the Solidity language is crap. I honestly think that ETH is fucking shit.
Yeah, and how many people actually want we're dealing at the cutting edge of like monetary innovation and evolution. I mean, yeah, it's fun to run a lot of science projects, but I mean, there's a lot of R&D dollars that are gonna like not turn into anything substantial.
Yeah, I would have to say with respect to Ethereum, I'm a bit more bullish than I think others are. I don't know about the current price per se, but I think longer term, I think something like Ethereum, once it kind of gets through its teething cycle and deals with the security issues and deals with these, tries to kind of maybe narrow the sort of what's basically an infinite attack surface right now. Then, ultimately, I think there is a market down the road for sort of arbitrarily complex smart contracts. But today, I mean, Ethereum's got one killer app, one killer dApp, and that's the ERC20. That is, token issuance. That's the only thing that's actually happened. It's the only dApp, if we can call it a dApp, that's happening on Ethereum today. But that's enough, by the way, to drive a shit ton of value into Ethereum, because you need to buy Ethereum to get involved in all these other kind of projects, which are with that stuff resembles much more the .com bubble than the actual underlying cryptocurrencies themselves do, in my mind. But
yeah, but another problem with that is, I mean, it's ERC, it's reach for comment, right? So like, it's not even supposed to be a specification.
I agree.
But then we've activated Segwit, and what's Segwit going to enable us to do? It's going to enable us to do side chains.
And side chains can do token issuance, no problem.
Yeah,
that'll be easy.
Yeah, but we'll actually, like when we do any type of altcoin or token issuance on side chains, we actually have a huge benefit, and the benefit is that we're able to move the bitcoins over there, right? So we provide a floor to the token value in terms of Bitcoin. Yes. And then we can create additional value on top of it. And so, I think that's going to be like, in terms of altcoins, I think when Adam Back first came out with the whole idea of them, someone put out a tweet where it was like the emperor in it, and it said, there was a disturbance in the force and all the altcoins were silenced or something like that, like from Star Wars. and it's like, no, this is serious stuff. Like, I mean, there's a real reason I think Segwit engendered so much animosity, is because it's directly attacking so many different areas all over the entire ecosystem, whether it's fungibility, whether it's Lightning Network, whether it's all these altcoins, et cetera, et cetera. A couple of the altcoins that I guess I also have kind of followed a little bit is, we've got Byteball, which is the digital oscillograph. I think that's pretty cool, especially like the Giga Black Bytes. And then the other one, I like when I did the interview with Jeff Berwick on BIP 148, they got like the 170,000 views or whatever, and kind of kicked off the whole, really kind of kicked off the whole thing. I mentioned PivX in there, and PivX was like 85 cents, and now I was just checking, it hit like 317 or something. And so I kind of like PivX because it's a fork of Dash, except it's proof of stake. Plus they want to roll in like the zero coin or something like that. So I think it could be kind of an interesting play. But I actually don't have any PivX. I just kind of been following the project and find it interesting.
Tracy, making me horny talking about these side chains and
building these kind of layers on top of Bitcoin, adding value like this. Sounds so good.
Well, girls should do that for you, right?
Well, no, it does. I have to agree with Flipper. Like, I sometimes feel like, I get inappropriately excited when I think about Segwit.
Oh my god, I can't. This Segwit shit sounds so good. I mean, when are we going to start seeing this stuff be realized?
Oh no, they've been working on it with, like, you go look at sidechains elements and some of the other stuff that Blockstream's been doing. It's on like Donkey Kong, and not to mention these satellites. These satellites are so cool.
Yeah, they are cool. I mean, I think people have been kind of downplaying that, but that is a really interesting piece of infrastructure that I think that the world and Bitcoin cryptocurrency needs in general. But I was going to say that from Bitfinex's standpoint, like, we've been working with Lightning developers to try to implement Lightning on Litecoin, and of course now it's going to be possible on Bitcoin. But I know that we're not the only exchange that's very keen on trying to be additive to that process and trying to help create markets for Litecoin for Lightning transactions. So it's happening. It's coming. It just, unfortunately, everything takes time when it comes to software development.
Phil, you gonna run
in my bunker upstate, I'm gonna get a sat node.
No, just to like check it against internet-driven attacks.
That's a good question.
What's really cool with the satellite node is, if you could get it to tied in directly with Armory on like some laptop, now you've got an air gap machine. Your ISP doesn't even know that you're using Bitcoin. The privacy implications of this.
It's great.
The privacy implications of the satellite are great, which I think are kind of understated. I mean, I just like it. Bitcoin is totally different. 2017 Bitcoin is totally different from like 2013 Bitcoin. And with Segwit getting rolled out and these satellites and everything, 2022 Bitcoin is going to be hugely different from 2017 Bitcoin.
Let me ask you, Tracy, what about fungibility?
Yeah, look at our Lightning network that's coming down the pipeline. I think that's one of the reasons Segwit probably got so much animosity because people like Jeff Garzik or Chain Analysis, like, it's going to make their job really, really hard. And that's the next big problem I think we need to tackle, is removing the smell from Bitcoin. The Swiss like to say that gold has no smell because you can melt down the gold bars and there you go, you got a new gold bar. So, we need to remove the smell from Bitcoin. And that's probably the next big step to do. But there's a lot that Segwit can do to help us accomplish that, especially with Lightning networks and cross-blockchain atomic swaps and some of these other things.
So let me ask you this question, and I apologize because maybe you've talked about this already when you first came on. I don't know your stance on this sort of Segwit 2x thing, but how do you feel about the fact that probably the best computer scientists to get us to all these advanced features might be substantially alienated if Segwit 2x is successful?
Well, I just don't see Segwit 2x getting any significant uptake.
Oh, okay. So you're in the camp of people that doesn't think it's going to.
How do you roll out and up to a network as big and diverse as Bitcoin that's been so widely deployed in a matter of a couple of months? It's just, that's a really hard thing to do. I just don't see that happening. I was reading over on RBTC, like some guy sent his BTC to his BCH address, and now they weren't showing up in his Trezor wallet, and he's like all freaking out because he can't find his Bitcoins.
You have no idea how much of that shit we deal with right now. So many people are sending Bitcoin to BCH addresses and vice versa. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah. The Bittrex CEO, he tweeted out, like, if you do that, we're not going to find your Bitcoins for you. So, the sheer amount of human capital that has to get upgraded in terms of like people being able to learn like what's going on, the intellectual distribution that has to take place, and all the different languages that it has to take place in. Like, you really think a couple of companies are going to be able to roll this out? A couple that at the end of the day are pretty small fry. I mean, like Stephen Pear's blog post about BitPay, they do $1 billion a month of transactions. I mean, how much volume does Bitfinex do in a day, right? Or BitGo, they've processed $1 billion like a month or something like that. It's like, well,
we
that's
do
nice,
we do about 10 billion a month. More, actually, about 12 now.
Yeah, I mean, like you're hurting a bunch of ADD ferrets on meth, honey badgers. You know, I mean, like, I don't see anybody being able to marshal the community that quickly, because the community is just so widespread. There's so many different interests. I mean, how do you get the nodes out there? How do you get people to trust your software? You know, I mean, especially if it's not out there in the open and the development's not out there in the open. Like, look at the Parity wallet, $30 million loss. I mean, that, like, it's just you don't get people to just like trust your software. You know, it takes a lot of time.
I was talking about this earlier as well because I mean, Gazik's reputation on what he's coded so far. And I'm looking at him, and then I'm looking at the core developers, which have looked after everything so well. You know, it's like I have a lot of trust and a lot of faith in them, and I don't want to give that to somebody else.
Well, I was talking with Greg Maxwell last week. I was having lunch with him. I was, really congratulating him on getting this satellite out, and he made the comment. He's like, "It's Jeff Garzik against my army." I mean, go look at the release notes on 0.15 or 0.14.2. I mean, we've got hundreds of people who've contributed to Bitcoin Core. Like, I mean, anybody actually done software development? It's like playing Django with a bunch of math in your head. I mean, loading all of that source code into your brain to figure out how it works and then keeping it fresh and not being stale. Like, I mean, that it's huge amounts of resources that are behind Bitcoin. I mean, you're not gonna just all switch over to 2x. I mean, sure, they can go ahead and do the fork, and we might have another Bcash on our hands, but
Bcash with no replay protection.
Yeah, Bcash with no this will be fun, and maybe that's what it takes. A lot of people losing a lot of money. To take some security seriously and understand why they should like the core team.
You think it's irresponsible of them?
Who?
You think it's irresponsible of those Segwit 2x people to not implement replay protection on behalf of users?
I think there's a lot of things that they're doing that's very irresponsible. I mean, at the end of the day, users, you want to be in this space. You got to put on your big boy or big girl, and it's all about the software you run. From what I understand, 0.15 is banning like BTC1 nodes or whatever it is. So, like, at the worst, you just totally ignore the Segwit 2x chain. Just ignore it. And I actually find it interesting that Bcash is able to I mean, why did they have to go and copy all the Bitcoin Core code? Like, why didn't they just write all their own code?
Yeah, but I think
it's really funny.
I think the code maintenance, the upkeep. I mean, you look at Bitcoin Core. I mean, they're merging pull requests every 6 hours. I mean, that kind of, like you say, mental Jenga, holding all that code in your head and putting it together and merging these pull requests. I mean, that's a tall order to keep up with that.
There's an enormous amount of man hours going into Bitcoin every day.
Nobody's able to keep up with that. I mean, look at how long it's taking a lot of these companies just to add BCH support. Like their tech teams are a disaster in a lot of cases. And so I mean the smartest, the most competent, a lot of the internet legends, they're working on Bitcoin Core. And at the end of the day, money follows management. Look, this isn't like, I mean, like you're trying to vie for like investor dollars. here. And so, like, why should I put any money on BTC1? I mean, please, like, make the case to me, because I try to be extremely objective. I don't like to let ego or politics get in my portfolio, because, I mean, that's cancerous to your portfolio. And so, make the case to me on why I should be allocating capital towards that. And I mean, why should I be allocating capital towards BCH? It looks like a complete train wreck, especially with how this EDA and the inflation seems to be playing out.
I totally agree. I mean, I just won't buy it, because I just have such little faith in it, in the development behind it. Like you said, the EDA thing. I mean, to me, I just keep saying, in my mind, it's worthless.
Yeah, well, I mean, what it does help us understand is the value of propaganda. Because we're like Buffett talked about how he liked holding Washington Post and other newspapers because there was value besides just in the earnings. And so, I don't think we should underestimate like the value of propaganda, especially in this space where we have to rely on experts, or most people have to rely on experts when it comes to the software they run or the coins they buy or whatever it is. And that just opens up a lot of opportunity for misallocations of capital.
Trace, I've got another one for you. What do you think about this whole, like, the Reddit shill taking over Bitcoin markets, over our Bitcoin, these fake Twitter accounts? Like, who's doing this? Who's, like, paying for all this kind of fake narrative spam shit we're seeing everywhere?
Yeah, I mean, I got no idea. I mean, where's the ROI on engaging in that type of behavior? Who stands to gain? Cui bono, right? Like, who stands to make any money from that?
Do you think Roger cares about ROI?
Yeah, I think he does. I mean, I actually spend quite a bit of time with Roger whenever I can. Yeah, I mean, we differ. We have a lot of differing opinions in public, but at the end of the day, I think he cares about his ROI. I think he misallocates capital, though. I think he makes mistakes and misallocates capital.
But isn't that the same thing? I mean, not caring about your ROI is about misallocating capital.
No, because you can you can care about your ROI, but you can make a mistake and misallocate capital and lose money. Right, but you still cared about trying to get the ROI.
I see. Yeah, okay.
And so I think, like, in Roger's case, I mean, oh my gosh, like, you look at Bitcoin.com. I mean, how much did he buy it for? Having a full-time team of like 32 people, how much cash has he burned? And been burning cash when Bitcoin was like $600, right? So had he just put all that capital into Bitcoin and sat on it instead of like burning it into Bitcoin.com for a hobby, I mean, that could be like $40 to $60 million, maybe even more. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what his financials look like over there with that thing, but one thing I know is that you can only take losses like that for so long before you have to get capital from somewhere else, like whether it's a state-sponsored attack or whatever. I don't think I will say I don't necessarily think that, like, all this Reddit stuff, or even Jihan for that matter, I don't necessarily think that they're state-sponsored actors. But for whatever that's worth.
What do you think about the so-called what we call it, the can't find the right word. I'll come back to it.
But yeah, there is a hardcore concerted marketing effort to pump this alternate narrative. Another one that gets me is this whole Blockstream core narrative. You see Jihan pushing it, Roger pushing it, Olivier pushing it, all the shills pushing it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like, really, you're gonna like go after Dr. Back, who's cited in the Tor white paper and the Bitcoin white paper, who's been like a cryptography political activist like before you were born, who like mentored David Chaum on anonymous digital cash. I mean, really? I mean, if anybody's got street cred, it's Dr. Back when it comes to like cypherpunk stuff.
I totally agree. And as you say, money follows management, and those people working on Core, it's like I'm against Segwit 2x, but if Core said, oh yeah, we're going to go ahead with this, and we're going to, I would follow Core, and what the Core developers want to do. I don't follow Barry Silbert and this agreement that was like made to sidestep all these people.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. You have to, unless you're going to write the software yourself or you're going to read and audit the software that's out there, you have to give your proxy vote to somebody, right? And so who are you going to give your proxy vote to? Are you going to give it to Jeff Garzik and all whoever's behind him? Are you going to give it to the Bcash team? Are you going to give it to the PivX team? Are you going to give it to the Dash team, the Monero team? Or are you going to give it to Bitcoin Core? Are you going to diversify it among a lot of them? I mean, you got to figure out where you're going to give your proxy.
How do you think prices going then, Trace, in the next 6-12 months?
What was that?
Where do you think prices going in the next 6 to 12 months?
Oh, man. Well, if we look at the 200-day moving average, it's around $2,000 for Bitcoin. So we're, a little bit over double that. Our previous bubbles have been anywhere from like 32x to 16x to 8x. So if we went to 4.5x, the 200-day moving average, when we're in like January or February, that could put us around $15,000 Bitcoin. Woo! So that would be, that I think is possible. Do I think is very probable? Probably not, but I have been completely surprised on where Bitcoin can go. I mean, I did an interview about a year ago. Bitcoin's $600, and I called the shot, said it'd go to 3,000, 3,500, and here we are, significantly above it. And the bull market actually seems fairly muted. I mean, maybe Phil's got a little bit more insight on that over on the exchange side of stuff. But, with Ledger X coming on board, getting CFTC approval for derivatives, and anybody who wants to know how those derivatives work, I interviewed Paul about 18 months ago on my Bitcoin Knowledge podcast, and I asked him some really hard questions on how these physically delivered Bitcoin derivatives are going to work. And I mean, I was actually pretty satisfied with his answers in terms that we're not going to be having a bunch of paper Bitcoin getting sold out there at the institutional level. And with the ETFs getting denied, how else does Goldman or pension funds or whoever come in and play with Bitcoin? And Bitcoin is tiny. It's a $70 billion market cap. It is nothing. It's not even a flea in the grand scheme of things right now. And yet there's a lot of potential. It's the only blockchain that has security, scalability, and liquidity all at the same time. And I don't see a BCH ETF being created. I don't see any BCH or Segwit 2x derivatives being traded or being slated to be traded. These are network effects. That's the sixth network effect of financialization, is getting these Wall Street instruments to take root with them. Here we go. I mean, I
still think it might take a little time. I mean, I think that Paul's got his, even though they've got a licensing approval, the products themselves, the contracts themselves have yet to be approved, and it's going to be, it's coming, but it's not imminent, right? It's not going to happen in 2 or 3 months. It's further out than that still.
Right. I mean, his first contract's going to be Bitcoin for delivery within a day, like the next day or
fully
something, right?
collateralized. But also
But
there's other.
but to put this in perspective, I had a friend. He runs an activist hedge fund in New York. We had breakfast. Him and a fellow that worked for Arthur Burns at the Fed, PhD in finance, taught at Columbia. The two of these have their hedge funds. They make, one's a self-made billionaire. We were talking about Bitcoin when it was a quarter. We had one of them was so nice. He let us have the board meeting for Armory at his office. Right. And and this guy still, from what I understand, still has not bought any Bitcoin, mainly because it's just been too difficult for him to try to figure out how to do it. I mean, I brought it to him at a quarter. We had board meetings with Armory, the wallet, in his office, and yet he's missed it. How much money is there on the sidelines that's looking at this, being like, you know what, maybe we'll allocate 1% into it?
But there is the GBTC, which obviously trades at a huge premium to NAV. But I mean, there are mechanisms. But I agree with you that once there is a vibrant sort of institutional market for derivatives, futures, options, what have you, then that will really that will mark the moment where real serious money enters, where billions enter the market very quickly. But I wanted to answer or rather respond to a point you made just a little while ago about what we're seeing as an exchange with respect to being at these, near ATH levels. I'm going to agree with you. The price action is muted, but there's money continues to pour into the exchange. People are getting long. I mean, we have the number of institutional customers that are signing up continues to be surprising. So we're dealing with a lot of we're dealing with a backlog of verifications. Obviously, we prioritize institutional verifications, but there's a lot. But the price action is hardly frothy yet. Hardly. I would say that based on where we are right now, I could very easily see us at 10,000 in the late fall. Only because we've made a very good base at these levels. And, every attempt to sell it off, there's been sharp attempts, but we've had really, really strong bounce backs. And I think it looks really bullish to me.
Yeah, it looks bullish to me, and I mean the volumes, the liquidity looks bullish, and then you get things like BCH. I mean, think of how much demand that's actually created for additional Bitcoins, right? Because anybody who's selling their BCH for BT, you still have to deliver those BTC to the blockchain.
That's true, and we're basically at $5,000 a Bitcoin when you take that into account.
Yeah, well, it makes me wonder how much of the Bitcoin price has actually moved up solely because people are trading their BCHs into BTC.
That's a good question. I don't know.
Because that dries up part of the saleable Bitcoin, right? Because I mean, we've got Bitcoin that's lost, we got Bitcoin that's in deep cold storage.
Is that kind of just bringing forward demand that was there but was kind of muted because of the fork? I don't know. It's hard to analyze that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know because I mean, the question is well, where did this quote unquote free money come from? I mean, that it was somewhere in there, but you created this asset that then somehow got a bid, and now since it's got a bid, you actually have to deliver BTC for these BCHs. I mean, one of the things I love about altcoins is the ability to acquire more BTC with them. Because why play around with Dash unless you're actually going to increase your net worth and as measured in Bitcoins, right?
Yeah. I said Bitcoin is it is the reserve currency of crypto, isn't it? It's how everybody accumulates. Like when I got my Bitcash, I obviously had and its price was instantly at this level, whatever. My USD value was suddenly a lot more. And when I wanted to preserve my USD value, I sold my Bitcash because I keep my value in Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that, unless people are just emotionally charged, whatever. I mean, in my case, I'm treating the Bcash if I actually sell or trade the Bcash into Bitcoin, I treat that as a tax recognition event, and so I'm actually going to be taking quite a bit of Bcash and turning it into dollars to pay taxes, but also to like purchase other things like real estate or whatever it is, just so that I'm a little bit more diversified. But I mean, everybody's playing a different way. But I'm also acquiring some BTC as a result of it too. So I mean, I kind of look at it like, man, this is a very interesting dividend type A. Whatever. I mean, I'm just surprised that Bitcoin is as high as it is, despite all of this craziness that's going on around it.
Well, so there's another thing I think, which is like kind of germane to a lot of the people that are in this team speak, is that everybody here, like a lot of people trade, these so-called, derivatives, whether it be on BitMEX or OKEX or whatever, but everybody, a lot of people here are basically naturally long crypto because that's what they move around and use as collateral for their trading. And so I always thought it's very curious that when somebody says, well, I'm short, I'm like, well, are you short or are you just flat? Is it really just you've hedged your collateral, or are you actually sort of net short? And I know Flipper and I have talked about this many times over the years now. That's basically it. It's like people. I think that if you in this space, you gotta have your stash, move it around, do what you want, trade using it as collateral. But it's really just a question of be long or be flat. I think it's being short. That's a tough call.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I mean, being short is like stepping in front of the freight train. But I mean, and everybody. I think. Maybe I just play it a different way, but I figure that everybody has like their deep cold storage that they just never move, right? And then you just keep adding to that, and then you have your medium cold storage, and then you have your warm storage, and maybe that's what you trade around on the different exchanges or whatever.
I think that's right. I think I know that I can think of several people I can see on this list right now that's their practice.
I was going to say I can count the times I've actually been short, like in fiat and short, probably on one hand.
And I mean, I'd
never really do that. I mean, like I'm never short gold or Bitcoin, like net, right? Because I just like it's part of the foundation for the rest of the financial castle. Having that gold and silver and Bitcoin, like that's just the sovereign foundation that I build everything else on top of.
Yeah, all of those times were during that 2014 bear market sell-off. Never since then.
Look, that was a hard time. 2014 was a hard time to be long. There's no doubt about that.
I mean, I was buying the bejesus out of all this stuff in, during that time frame because I got businesses that are not crypto related that throw off cash. And so I just take all that free cash flow. I mean, I buy Bitcoins every month and continue adding to the cold storage, the deep cold storage. So, I mean, maybe I'm just a little overly bullish on Bitcoin, but it's worked out well so far, since I got into it back when it was very cheap.
Yeah, and there's people in here which have, also the same. They buy every month through the GBTC with their IRA and whatever. They don't even care what price. They just keep buying every month.
What do you guys?
Yeah, I mean, where else do you put capital, right? Like, I mean, I don't want to put it in bonds. I don't want to put it in. I don't even really want to put it in real estate. So. Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin is just so easy to deal with compared to all the other investments out there.
What were you saying, Quimmer?
Just wanted to touch on the issue that we have at hand here, the global uncertainty of North Korea. It looks like Bitcoin reacted to that, and I thought that was really interesting. We may be seeing Bitcoin really take hold of that safe haven asset class. We never really saw that correlation, but as soon as that started getting press, we saw a nice little rip up on Bitcoin along with gold. Thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I wonder what could happen to the Bcash price, because from what I understand, a lot of the new money coming from South Korea. And so if Seoul were to get nuked, for example, like there goes that whole market, right?
That's wishful thinking.
Well, I mean, Bitcoin is much more widely distributed all across the globe in terms of getting usage and all that stuff. So you don't have we're in a crazy geopolitical we're in a crazy geopolitical situation. Bitcoin just seems to be so much more widely distributed among so many different countries and areas that like you're not limited just to one single country or market.
All right, guys, I got to sign off. I got some kids I got to put to bed.
Thanks, Dan.
Guys, later.
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah,
Trace,
same
nice
with me,
chat
Phil.
with you. Take care.
Yeah, good chatting with you. See you. We'll have dinner again sometime. See you guys.
See you guys.
Thank you.
That was a good discussion.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Trace is the man.
This morning was like the most bearish this channel has been, and then now that was the most bullish this channel.
Jeff, you gotta stop getting sexual with our guests.
Who was that?
Well, me. When did I do that?
I think everyone did.
Yeah.
Who was that? Who was saying he was getting hard about the stuff that Trace was saying.
We're pushing up here on the quarterlies on OPEX and FinX and everywhere else.
Yep, we broke some consolidation on the small time frames. Broke up.
Be sure to get a copy of the free Bitcoin Guide at freebitcoinguide.com. Got a question or suggestion? Record your voice at bitcoin.kn. Don't be shy. To help the show, share bitcoin.kn with friends, post about it on Reddit, and otherwise spam the interwebs. Your iTunes comments and 5-star reviews are very important to us. Please continue tuning in to the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast, where we release interviews with the top people in the Bitcoin world. Now take some choline and let that Bitcoin knowledge consolidate.